My sense is we're not there, but the way they've spoken publicly, I would think that Daniel Jones comes in with a leg up on the starting job, that it's almost his job to lose.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a teaching tutorial Thursday. You know what that means? It means usually we have the legend, the civilian GOAT, the greatest of all time when it comes to breaking down the videotape for a guy that never played, never coached in the NFL. Truth be told, knows a lot more than a lot of people that did, because I did, and I know a lot of people that did, and Greg knows more than they do, I can assure you. Check him out on social media at Greg Cosell. We are, of course, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. There are a lot of moves that were made the last couple of days, a couple of intriguing trades. The Vikings and Titans loading up on big men. We do have some quarterback movement that we'll get to a little bit later after Greg. But we got to start probably with the quarterbacks, with Greg Cosell. He's presented by Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka. Please drink responsibly. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Greg, we will get back to the college prospect breakdown in a major way starting next week all the way through the draft. So We're going to hit every position. I know you've been grinding. So far, we've really only done quarterbacks. So I'm looking forward to diving into running backs and receivers and O-line, D-line. And there's a lot to talk about over the next month or so, really 6 weeks. But today, there's just too much going on with the veteran free agents.
Yeah.
We have to talk about it. It's been a lot since we spoke last Wednesday, I believe it was, to get your combine recap. So let's start with the quarterbacks. And I think you have to start with Seattle,
You do.
Greg, because they move on from Geno Smith. They move on from DK Metcalf. They bring in Sam Darnold. I guess I'm going to kind of give you a blank canvas on the Seahawks' decision to move from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it, Ross, I think from a football standpoint. I mean, I know there's always money, there's age, there's many factors involved, but I think, you know, the way I think about this, I always think from a football perspective. And I think you have to start with the offensive coordinator they hired in Clint Kubiak. For people who follow football, they know the Kubiak name and they know what that means in terms of offense. They want the quarterback under center. They want the play-action pass game. And keep this in mind. Last year in Minnesota, Sam Darnold had the second most under center play-action dropbacks of any quarterback in the league, second only to Jared Goff. And he was incredibly successful in the under center play-action pass game. And that's what Clint Kubiak wants to do. That's the foundation of how he plays. It's the run game, and they have two quality backs. Hopefully Kenneth Walker stays healthy and can be a true foundation back. But they found out last year that if they need to play Zach Charbonnet, he can play. He's obviously not as good as Walker, but that to me is what they want to do offensively. That's the foundation. And I think that's one reason. That's the football perspective of it. As I said, I'm sure there's other reasons, but from a football perspective, that's the reason, in my view, they did what they did.
Right. And a couple thoughts there too, Greg. Well, I'll fill in some of the blanks. Sam Darnold's several years younger than Geno Smith.
Yes.
Geno Smith wanted more money. He wants $45 million a year. They got Darnold for $33 million a year. It's a big difference. I mean, that's $12 million a year.
Yeah.
And it's interesting with them moving on from Metcalf, moving on from Geno, moving on from their offensive coordinator. You know, they're basically telling us, Greg, and we talked about this a little bit on the Fantasy Feast with John Daigle yesterday, Mike McDonald was really not happy with the offense, clearly, in any respect. And it's interesting because defensive coaches, they typically like people from the McVay, Shanahan, Kubiak tree, and they like guys that do under center play action and boots, because they know how hard that is for the defense.
Right. It's because it's harder, Ross, to defend play action under center than it is play action in the gun. And there's many reasons for that. We won't get into all that right now, but that's the foundation of these offenses. And look what he's done on defense, too. They made probably an under-the-radar re-signing of Ernest Jones, who's a very, very good linebacker, very multi-dimensional. They just signed a Marcus Lawrence. I mean, this defense, if you look at the personnel that they have, this is a very good defense. McDonald is building a really good defense, and he's obviously a very good young defensive coach in this league. And now, ideally, I mean, we're speaking in March, but ideally, he's putting together under Clint Kubiak, who he hired intentionally. That, it's not a random hire, who he hired intentionally to build a specific kind of offense and you nailed it, that he knows is difficult to defend against.
And I think they would rather spend the money on guys like DeMarcus Lawrence and guys up front, as opposed Jaron Reed bringing him back, as opposed to giving Metcalf all the money that he got. It's interesting because part of me thinks, Greg, that Metcalf could have been, Clint Kubiak's version of Andre Johnson. Could have been the guy, the Julio Jones, could have been that featured X-receiver that the Shanahan offense does such a good job of getting open. I think it's interesting that they decided they did not want that to be Metcalf. My guess maybe is that they'll feature Smith and Jigba maybe, Greg?
Well, and keep one thing in mind. There might be other reasons, that we're not there in the building. But the point is they made a decision in terms of how they want to allocate their resources because there's always receivers in drafts, Ross. Now, you could argue that Metcalf, if he truly played to what his physical traits are, is an Andre Johnson, is a Julio Jones. He hasn't shown that on a consistent basis, but he certainly has those kinds of traits. But the point is they made a decision not to go that route in terms of allocating resources, and there's always receivers in drafts. More than 30 receivers are drafted every year in drafts, and you can find, it's just a matter of finding the right ones, obviously, but that's a position you can always get in the draft.
Meanwhile, Greg, Geno goes to the Raiders. He's got to be the best quarterback the Raiders have had for a while. I mean, as you would say, he's a professional quarterback.
Yep.
He's probably a top half of the league guy. What are your thoughts on Geno going to the Raiders with Chip Kelly in that offense?
Yeah, well, now they needed a quarterback. Last year we knew they couldn't compete without a quarterback. They didn't really have a true starting quarterback in the league, and then you're behind the eight ball right away. So now they have one. But it's a roster that needs a lot of work. I don't know what their draft situation is with number of draft picks, but my guess is unless you're a fan of the Raiders or a fan of that division, you probably couldn't name their wide receivers. So it's a roster that needs a lot of work. Obviously, they've got a great tight end in Bowers. They've got an O-line that's a little bit in flux. They've got some positions that need improvement. So it'll be interesting. Chip Kelly does a great job schematically of getting the most out of what he has, but by NFL standards, their offense is not really up to par, and they're going to have to address that. And you can't address everything in 1 year, but at least they do have a quarterback.
That is a huge, you think about how much just that makes a difference. We talked about that on the Even Money betting podcast. That's like a 3-point difference, according to the professional bettors, to have a quarterback like Geno Smith. So these next couple guys are especially interesting. What a strange trip it's been for Justin Fields, Greg. He gets $30 million fully guaranteed, 2-year deal from the Jets. He's definitely the quarterback this year. He's got $10 million guaranteed for next year as well. Your thoughts with Fields and Tanner Angstan. We don't really know what he'll do. We do know what he did. He's coming from Detroit, which is the under center play action you just referenced. That's where Tanner Angstan's coming. I don't know. Do you see Fields in that type of offense, Greg?
Fields is a guy, and I'm just being honest, that I've really struggled with. And I don't mean that in a bad way, that, oh my God, I don't think he's any good. I feel like there's something there. He's a very talented kid. He's 6'3", 230. He can throw the ball. He moves really well. We know that he has some limitations. We know he's not necessarily the kind of quarterback that sees it all the time exactly with the processing speed and clarity that you want. We understand that. Not every quarterback is like that. But I just feel like in the right system, with the right coaching, that there's something there. Now, theoretically, if Tanner Angstrom's going to take that Detroit offense and pretty much just put it with the Jets, I think that's an offense that really does help the quarterback. It's a lot of under center play action. We just spoke about that regarding the Seahawks. You know how that is, Ross. That helps to define the reads and the throws for the quarterback. I don't want to say it's simple, because nothing's simple in the NFL, but it's more defined by NFL standards. Now, obviously, you're not going to be doing that on 3rd and 9, and those are the situations where obviously his legs become a factor, but also you do have to have quicker processing speed and get the ball out to the right receiver at the right time with the right kind of throw, and that is where he has struggled at times throughout his career. But I just feel like there's something there, and I don't know Justin Fields at all, but I don't know why I'm pulling for him, because I don't know him, but I just feel like there's something to work with.
I'll be curious. A lot of quarterbacks, Greg, they do not like having their back to the defense.
That is a great point.
And when they snap their head around, they have to make a decision in an instant. That's not for everybody.
No, and he may be one of those guys. They'll find, and by the way, if he's not that guy, they'll have to make that adjustment if that's the way they want to start out teaching him, because and as you know, Ross, the way kids are brought up playing quarterback now, no one's under center, no one turns their back. That's a learned trait. That's not just something you can say, oh, let's do that. That's a learned trait, and it takes time.
That's an unbelievable point you just made, is that none of these guys do that in high school, and very few of them do it in college.
Yep.
They just don't do that stuff at those levels that much anymore. And so that's tough. You're asking a lot of those guys. They're saying it's a competition between Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, and Indy. Daniel Jones getting a really good chunk of change to be the quarterback there in Indy. What do you think of his fit with the Colts?
Yeah, I mean, my sense is we're not there, but the way they've spoken publicly, I would think that Daniel Jones comes in with a leg up on the starting job, that it's almost his job to lose. But we don't know that. That would be my sense, because they've been very open about the Anthony Richardson situation. I've talked to a lot of people about Jones. I've watched 90% of his games. You probably remember his rookie year, Ross, when it looked like he was going to be a really good NFL quarterback. He's a big kid. He's a smart kid. He throws it well. He's got good movement. I always felt that in the pocket that he was lacking one trait that I thought he really needs to have, which is pocket mobility. Not running. We know he can run fast in a straight line, but kind of the ability to avoid the pressure by stepping or climbing. I thought that was an area that he didn't really do well. Like he didn't slide one way or the other. He didn't climb the pocket well. But I always felt that there was traits there and there was talent there. And he's got a good receiving core. We'll see how it works out. I think it's pretty evident that it's going to be, quote unquote, an open competition. But I kind of feel like Daniel Jones would go in with a leg up right now.
I got to tell you, Greg, I think this is going to work out. I really do.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. I've seen what Shane Steichen can do.
Yep.
On multiple occasions. Not only Jalen Hurts, but then, he got Gardner Minshew. I mean, they went 9-8 that year.
Correct.
With Gardner Minshew. Daniel Jones is way more talented than Gardner Minshew.
Yes.
Is it crazy for me, Greg, to say that I can see Shane Steichen? People might not compare these guys to each other. I can see Shane Steichen doing a lot of things with Daniel Jones like he did with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
I can see a lot of RPOs. I can see him having Daniel Jones pull the ball and run it 2 to 4 times a game, because people forget Daniel Jones is fast. He's like legitimately fast.
Yes, he's straight line fast.
And so what they do, Greg, in my mind, is they run the Eagles offense from 2022 as much as they can, because the longer Jones holds the ball, the worse it is.
Correct.
He's
And
one of those guys.
And they have people. I mean, Jonathan Taylor is a big-time back. They've got receivers. So this is not an offense bereft of talent, Ross. So I would be very surprised if Daniel Jones did not emerge as the starter here.
So the guy we're waiting on as of Thursday morning while we're doing the show is Aaron Rodgers. Fascinating that it appears at a minimum the Steelers and Giants want him and they're waiting on his decision. The Jets took a $49 million dead cap hit to move on from him.
Yeah.
And yet the Steelers and Giants are waiting on him. I guess I have this question. Are we sure, Greg, he's better than Russell Wilson? I mean, I called that game on the radio last year. Jets and Steelers. Russell Wilson outplayed him in that game. I'm just curious about that.
I can tell you from a tape perspective, we are sure that he's better than Russell Wilson. I don't think that's a question. I think the larger question, and I don't normally get into this, but I heard someone else speak about this, so I'm basically going to paraphrase that. Someone who's in the know and knows more than I do about the inner workings of all this with teams. But I think if you sign Aaron Rodgers, you've got to sit down. And as I said, I'm paraphrasing what was said to me. You've got to sit down with him. He's got to be in your offseason program. He's got to be in your building. He's got to be part of the team from day one. He can't just show up. So I think you have to have that conversation. Look, I would assume he wants to get back and try to win a championship. That's why he's still playing football. The guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer. So, I think, but there's no question from a tape perspective that he's better than Russell Wilson.
Got it. Okay. So that kind of answers the next question. I do want to ask about some of these other moves. The Eagles, maybe the most surprising move yet, Greg. And I'm going to talk about this because we recorded this week Monday and Tuesday. This is my last show of the week. They traded Gardner-Johnson to the Texans after I did Tuesday's show. Was not expecting that, Greg. 1 year into a 3-year deal. He played extremely well for the Eagles. I'll get into it. I think there's a million reasons why they might have done it, but it's still kind of a shocker for Eagles fans. Is there anything you saw from him or any reasoning you can think behind this?
I mean, I think the Eagles have made it clear, by what they've done. The only player they re-signed on defense was Zach Bond. They let Sweat go. They let Williams go. They traded Gardner-Johnson. I think they're sort of reallocating their resources, and again, they're Super Bowl champions. They've been in 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls, so it's hard to argue. But from a tape perspective, Gardner-Johnson played really, really well. Now, the player that's out there, and again, who knows what's going to happen? We're recording on a Thursday morning. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 24, 48, 72 week? Who knows? But a player that's out there that you can probably get on a 1-year deal who's extremely familiar with Vic Fangio's defense is Justin Simmons. And he's out there. And, it wouldn't surprise me if the Eagles look to sign someone like that who comes in with great familiarity with the defense and can step right in.
Yeah, I would think the interesting thing there is the Eagles don't want to lose the comp picks that they're going to get for losing all these guys. So they either need to pay Justin Simmons so little money that it doesn't count against the comp picks.
Yeah.
Or they need to see, Greg, if he'll wait till May 18th or whatever that date is where they no longer count against the comp picks.
Yeah, and again, who knows how, that's that stuff better than I. But the point is Gardner-Johnson played very well last year. Their safeties played extremely well. And in the nature of that defense, what I think people have to understand is just how important linebackers and safeties are in the Vic Fangio defense. Normally we think defense, out edge pass rushers and corners, not that they're not important. I don't want to make it seem like they're not important, but the way Vic Fangio plays his defense, and you know this, Ross, linebackers and safeties are critical. You could make the argument, and I've had this conversation with people, that Reed Blankenship was such a critical player in the Eagles defense. And maybe a lot of people, outside of Philly, I mean, they know his name because they won the Super Bowl, but don't really understand how important a player he is to that defense.
What does Cooper Kupp have left, Greg? It's interesting.
Yeah,
He's been released. They couldn't trade him.
yeah.
He's released. He's available. They obviously wanted to move on from him. They bring in Devontae Adams, which, by the way, you called last Wednesday. You and I talked about that. You kind of called that being a great fit. Now Kupp has to go elsewhere.
Yeah, Kupp's a hard guy to figure, to be honest, Ross. He hasn't really played much in 3 years. And I don't think he looks the same when he plays. I think he's, so it's hard to know. Again, I don't know if he's totally healthy now. I don't know what his situation. He's only played 8 years. It's not as if he's played 12, 13, 14 years. But when your legs start to go, it's always hard to know what a player has left. That's the difficult part to know. So I don't have a brilliant answer for that. I'm just being honest. When a guy's, I don't know how many games he's played in the last 3 years, but it's not a lot. And so I just don't know.
Last team I wanted to ask you about is the Bears. You don't see that very often. 2 new guards and a center. Very clear, Greg, what the focus was for Ben Johnson with Caleb Williams as his quarterback.
Yeah, and I think that is so important, because what people need to remember is Caleb Johnson is not tall. Caleb Williams, is not tall. He throws a beautiful ball, by the way. I mean, he's just one of those guys. It's just so pretty. But he's not tall. He tends to perceive and overreact to pressure. That's not really pressure by NFL standards. So what you're trying to do is shore up the inside. And keep one thing in mind. Jonah Jackson was in Detroit with Ben Johnson. He knows the offense. Okay, so I think that's a really smart move. It's a good way. You want your quarterback to be really comfortable. You talk to a lot of quarterbacks, and they will tell you that the center, and you know this, Ross, you've played the position, is the most important position on the offensive line. That's what a lot of quarterbacks will tell you. And they've really shored up the interior, and I think that's a really smart move, because Caleb Williams needs to be comfortable, because otherwise he moves unnecessarily, and he gets himself in trouble. He creates most of his own sacks by doing that, and he led the league in sacks last year. So you need him to feel comfort when he drops back, because he is such a beautiful thrower of the football.
Check him out on social media. He is the man, at Greg Cosell. Fantastic as always, Greg. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
You know what we like on this show, and really all my shows? Winners and picking winners. You can be an easy winner at rewards.labattusa.com. All you need to do is buy beer and you get gear. What does that mean? Take a picture of any Labatt that product that you buy. Any beer, any size, stadium, store, doesn't matter. Then you upload it instantly to rack up points for incredible merch from rewards.labattusa.com.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, the Vikings, they paid a lot of money in the trenches. They signed Jonathan Allen, offensive guard Will Fries, and defensive tackle Javon Hargrave.
Remember, they'd also signed Ryan Kelly already. So 2 interior O-linemen, 2 interior D-linemen. Clearly, the Vikings know where they feel like they need to improve, and they probably were watching the Eagles kick some butt in the NFC Championship game in Super Bowl.
There are not that many trades, except the Eagles. They did trade Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the 6th-round pick, to Houston for Kenyon Green, a 5th-round pick that you and Greg talked about.
Right. The Cowboys also traded for Kenneth Murray, the linebacker. I would just say there's always a lot of reasons why moves like this happened. I am a little bit surprised that the Eagles couldn't get more for Gardner-Johnson, but maybe that says something, that they couldn't get more for him, quite frankly. But I will say, obviously money's involved. This will be the 5th year in a row Gardner-Johnson is with a new team. He's a very good player, so that says something about something, right?
A lot of quarterback news. That includes the Colts. They signed Daniel Jones to compete with Anthony Richardson. The Cardinals bring in Jacoby Brissett as a backup to Kyler Murray. 49ers, they brought in Mac Jones last night, and Marcus Mariota is back in Washington.
The Niners getting Mac Jones 4 years after everybody thinks that's who Kyle Shanahan wanted to draft, but got talked into Trey Lance, is objectively hilarious. I already said it. I really like the Daniel Jones move in Indy. I think he's going to start. I think he's going to play well. I think we're going to be talking about him like he's this year's Sam Darnold.
There are a lot of notable deals that include the Giants signing safety Javon Holland, the Bills bringing in Joey Bosa and Larry Ogunjobi, Ravens, they signed DeAndre Hopkins, the Browns with Malik Collins, Broncos signed tight end Evan Ingram. Steelers, they signed Darius Slay. Panthers, they signed running back Rico Dowdle. The Chiefs, they bring in quarterback Kristen Fulton. Saints, they get safety Justin Reed. The Cardinals signed Dalvin Tomlinson. Eagles bring in A.J. Dillon. DeMarcus Lawrence signs in Seattle. Mike Williams returns to the Chargers. While the Titans, they beef up the trenches with guard Kevin Zeitler and Draymond Jones, a defensive tackle. And the Commanders bring in not one, but two former Patriots in cornerback Jonathan Jones and defensive lineman Dietrich Wise.
So it's interesting. The ones that jump out to me out of those you named, the Bills with Bosa and Ogunjobi, they're trying to get some guys that can get to the quarterback and be better in the fourth quarter of these playoff games. They just need to help. They just need to hope in particular that Bosa stays healthy. The Titans going with vets like Zeitler at right guard. I think they want him to be next to J.C. Latham at right tackle, and Draymond Jones is interesting. I kind of like a lot what the Commanders are doing, bringing in guys with championship pedigree like Wise and Jones from the Patriots to help continue to get them to the next level.
There are several players that have been released in the last 48 hours. That includes Leonard Floyd from the 49ers, who quickly did then sign with the Atlanta Falcons. Panthers, they move on from running back Miles Sanders. The Rams, as you talked about with Cooper Kupp. And the Jets, they released linebacker C.J. Mosley.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that the Rams couldn't work out some type of trade where they get a 7th-round pick and maybe they take on some of the money, but maybe they didn't want to take on any of the money. I don't know. Leonard Floyd, that's a good signing by the Falcons. That guy, he's one of those guys that, you never even remember what team he's on. He gets 8 sacks every year. So that makes a lot of sense to me out of those moves.
And there were a lot of guys that returned to their current teams. The Saints, they brought back Juwan Johnson, the tight end. Falcons, they bring back cornerback Mike Hughes. Cowboys, they re-signed kick returner wide receiver Kevontae Turpin. Dolphins, they bring back linebacker Tyrell Dotson, while vets like Harrison Smith, Cam Jordan, Adam Thielen all signed up for another year with the Vikings, the Saints, and the Panthers, respectively.
And in particular, Harrison Smith and Cam Jordan, just unbelievable. I mean, I hope, and I said this on Twitter last night, at Ross Tucker NFL, I hope people, in particular Vikings fans and Saints fans, appreciate just how special that is to have guys playing for you in year 14 for Smith, year 15 for Cam Jordan, at age 36 this upcoming season. That is extremely rare. I can't tell you how impressive it is to me for a guy to be playing 15 years in the NFL or 14 years in the NFL to be doing it at age 36. I mean, 36 is very different from 24. Very different. And I know I felt that. And I'm sure on some level these guys do as well. Super, super impressive. You know what I like? I like saving money. I like not spending money when I don't have to spend money. You know a good example of this? Vodka. Yeah. If you're buying vodka to have a drink, you guys know I've told you before, I like to get some type of like Gatorade Zero or Pedialyte or the Gatorade Light that has like the electrolytes in it. I like that with some Smirnoff in it. It's delicious. It's exactly what I'm looking for. And you can get the bottle of Smirnoff for $12.99. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Pricing at the sole discretion of the retailer may vary by state. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. You do not need to spend a fortune for vodka. Smirnoff, we do game days. Other than that, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. Huge fan of myfrontpagestory.com. You should be as well. One of the best gifts I've ever seen. At a minimum, just go there, throw your email address in so you get that 20% discount code right away. Backofficescheduler.com. HumanHeadNYC.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.